Let us start by introducing ourselves. My name is Tez and I work as a software development engineer at the Microsoft Development Center in Copenhagen. My work is focused on localization features for the application part of NAV for various countries, which we also call regulatory features. Guys?
So, hello, my name is Nikola Kukrika, and I'm an application developer in Microsoft, and for the last year I have been working on the mini app.
Hello, my name is Bogdan Sturzoiu. I also work for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. I spend a lot of time working on supply chain features, and now I'm mostly focused on cache management features.
Hello, my name is Anders. I've been working with NAV for the last 20 plus years, the last 10 years from Microsoft. Welcome.
Welcome.
To give you an overview of today's session, we are going to talk about design in the NAV application, and we are starting by introducing the concept of design pattern. And then we'll follow with drilling down into some specific examples of patterns that are now used in the NAV. In the second part of the session, my colleagues will tell you about what the mini app is and will give you a short introduction demo. And they will continue also with giving you a few examples of design patterns that we have introduced now for the first time with the mini app. You are maybe familiar with the design pattern we have published on the NAV team blog in the last 6 months. But if not, let me give you a short intro. So what is a design pattern? Generally, if we have one way of solving a software problem that is well designed, that has proven that it stood the test of time, and can be extracted and generalized and used somewhere else in the application, this is a candidate for a design pattern. And it's not about code duplication. It's about reusing the same concept, but maybe with different implementations. For example, in NAV, we have setup tables, which we use when we need to store some setup parameters in the database. And those setup tables are unique in a way that they have just one row and they have a primary key. So whenever there is some setup to be done in the NAV application, we use this table which has this unique design. And the implementation is different because the fields depend on what to set up. So this illustrates the idea of a design pattern. To widen the context a little bit, let us think of NAV developers into a world of software development. And design patterns have been widely adopted by the software object-oriented community in the last almost 20 years. And maybe you have heard terms like a singleton, a facade, a proxy, or a bridge, or a farm. Those are all design patterns. And one really nice benefit of having and knowing the design patterns is that, I don't know, if one day you just go by the coffee machine and meet another developer, you can say, hey, I'm going to start this feature by implementing the farm pattern. And the other guy or girl will know immediately what you're talking about without having to need to explain it or sending the other person to read the long explanation. So what we are saying is that design patterns in the object-oriented world have become a part of the software development vocabulary. However, for NAV, although we have patterns in the code, we don't have a formal description of them. And having a description of the patterns would help us understand why the code is as it is, because maybe you can think of a better way. So why didn't we do it differently? What is the reason we approach one solution behind another? And of course, you can all read the code, but do you know why it's been done like this, or if it's a good idea to change it or not? Let me show you the team who has worked on this project so far. You can see that it's a blend between Microsoft people and the community. And I would like to use this occasion to say a special thank you to the partner Ready Software team, who has been the most active so far in working together with us on the patterns, reviewing and writing the patterns. The list is long, so I'm not reading names, but I also want to say welcome to the 4 people. Their names are in the right side. They are the newest members of our team, and we're really, really looking forward to work together. The reason we have the slide about community is actually extremely important for us. So far, we have published the design patterns on the Microsoft blog, where Microsoft can publish things. But wouldn't it be awesome if any CIL developer would be able to comment, edit, share ideas, or even write patterns? And now we want to open this project to the community. So we have moved the patterns. Actually, we have copied the patterns from the blog on a wiki page on the community.dynamics.com. And I want to use this as a call to action. Please take a look, see what we have there, and if you feel that this is something useful for you, or if you want to publish or to have author rights on the wiki, just contact any of us with a private message on the website, and we can take it from there. What you'll find today on the wiki is just the patterns that we have published previously on the blog. But this is because we have intentionally not published the 9 patterns that we'll show today. We wanted to show them here for the first time. And we also have a bunch of patterns that we are working on. So stay tuned, because there's nice stuff coming on the wiki. And now it's time to look into some specific examples of design patterns used in NAV. And to keep this presentation interesting for both new or CIL developers, also for the ones of you who have been here for a long time and know the application, we have tried to add some already used patterns, but also some patterns that are quite new and that we have used in the latest release the first time. And now we're showing slides. So you will see just a short overview of what the patterns are. But if you want to implement them, you will find a complete description that you can share with your colleagues or with your friends, and that will guide you quite easily on how to use the patterns, and will also show you where they're used in NAV, so you can take a closer look. So pattern number 1. It's called journal error passing. And to give you some context, this is about users entering data into NAV. And like any repetitive process, it can be affected by human error. So maybe the data entered by the user is incomplete, incorrect, or just inconsistent with whatever is in the rest of the system. And the example that I'm going to use for that is the implementation of SEPA credit transfer. SEPA is an European standard for transferring money. And what NAV does, it takes the transactions from the payment journal, so the user has the opportunity to export those in file with a standard format, and this file goes to the bank, which is doing the payments for the user. So the user doesn't do them manually. So in this context, imagine that the user has entered 50 lines of data in the payment journal, and the scenario is that the user is then going to click on export this data to a payment file. The same pattern you can imagine using with posting. So there is some data, and there is some processing to be done with the data. The user can export. And the traditional way of handling this is that we get a code unit or some code that will perform the export, but first wants to make sure that we have all the data. For example, we have an IBAN number on the bank account of the vendor, so we need to transport to move the money. The validation goes through the data line by line. And the old style is to just stop at the first error, show a message to the user saying, we've got this error, please correct it. The user invokes the action of exporting again. The validation goes again through the first line. If there is no error, it goes further on and shows all errors. There are a few problems with this approach. First is that it's very repetitive for the user who has to click around a lot. The second is that validation runs on all lines, no matter if the data was corrected or not over there, over and over again. So by the time it gets to line 50, it already ran validation on line 1 too many times. The third problem is that the user has no clue if it's just one more error that he has to correct and then go home, or it will take more hours to finish it all. A better way to do it is to actually very simple. Just run validation on all lines, store the errors into a temporary table, and show them all at the end. How this looks is like this. And if I can find the laser pointer, I will guide you through it. So this is an example from the SEPA credit transfer. And over here you can see the lines that the user entered. It's more lines in reality, maybe. And after entering data, the user has clicked here on export payments to file. Validation goes in the background, and the user is seeing an error saying that, hey, you have some data to correct and we didn't export your file. Please go ahead and fix it. After dismissing the error, this is an interesting part. The lines with errors are showed in red over here in the left. And on the right-hand side, we have a fact box, which is one context sensitive, so it shows only the errors from the selected line. And yeah, just shows the errors over there. If the user here in the second image has selected the second line, the error message is changing based on what errors found on that line. How to implement it? So here on this slide, you can see the actors that are involved into this interaction and the application objects that are taking part of it. So the first is not an application object, it's a real person. This is the user who is initiating everything. Then we have a journal page. This is the page that you saw before, where the data is entered. You have an error page list part, which is hooked into the journal in the error text table buffer. So it will show whatever errors are there filtered by the line. Then there is a processing code unit, or some processing code, wherever you choose to place that code, which calls a validation code unit, which is adding maybe errors if there are any in the journal error text table. And the story goes like that. The user initiates the whole thing. So the journal line entries, clicks on file export. The file export action goes invoking the processing code unit, which needs to make sure that data is right. The validation goes line by line, adds errors to the journal error table, and returns. The processing code unit then calls the journal error text table API to ask if there are any errors. And if there are errors, they are shown in the list part, so the user gets an error message, goes back and corrects everything, and runs validation again, which should go fine. And this is a small code example. This is the API of the journal export error text, which is simply given the opportunity to create a new error line, which is linked to the journal templates, name, the batch, the document number, and the journal and line number. Then we can ask the table if the journal line has any errors, if the whole batch has any errors. We also can clean up errors at the end of the processing, because we don't need to store them. They are useless after they've been corrected. A few examples of journal error processing which are implemented in NAV, and this is where you can go check and see how it works. There are the SEPA credit transfer and the direct debit features, but they're the same concepts with a different implementation you will find in the supply planning feature, in the error log table, and in the costing feature in the costing table. So that was it for pattern number 1, and it's a short water break for me. Pattern 2, it's called the temporary dataset report. And the context for this pattern is that if we have data report, we are not always that lucky that we have all our data already computed in a table that we just simply hook into the report and use the built-in NAV iterator to go through that and show it. Sometimes we need to gather our data from multiple tables, or sometimes we need to just calculate it at runtime based on whatever parameter we didn't have in database before. So we can do that and put the information into a temporary table, but then the NAV built-in iterator doesn't work on temporary tables. It works on information that is already in the database. So what to do in this case for our report is to first create our buffer and then use a data item of type integer. This is, you will not find this table in the object designer because it's a system table, but for all practical purposes, you can imagine that the integer table just contains one field of type integer, which on each line is incremented by 1. So it just contains 1, 2, 3 until the max integer value. To show it with a picture, and here goes my laser pointer again. First step, we have report controller, gets request paid parameters and goes wherever it needs to gather the data, puts it in the buffer, and then calls, which is the actual core of this pattern, is how to use the integer data item. Calls it and uses it as an incremental iterator to know where in the newly created data buffer. And to drill into this a little bit more, this is step 1, gathering the data. You have here the same report controller that we saw in the previous slide, and this is an example of getting data from 2, but you can count to n data tables. So we just loop through, get our data, put it in the buffer, loop through the second table, get data, put it in the buffer. Step 2, and the interesting one, is how we go step by step through this buffer. And there are 2 ways. Either we use the integer data item to go step by step, and at each step we check if we have the buffer. If not, go 1 step more. The other way is to count from before how many lines we have in the buffer and go from 1 to n, which is our number of lines that we have counted. And to show you some code, this is the example of where we count how many lines we have. So on the on-pre data item, on the integer data item, consider that our buffer is called contact document buffer. We just count how many lines we have, and from number from 1 to n, if the number is 1, in the on after get record, it means that if the number is 1, we have just started iterating through our buffer, so we find the first row and continue processing, else we just call next. And that's it. Some places where you'll find implementation of this inside NAV, there are the sales quote reports, the order confirmation report, or the sales invoice reports. There are other places, but these are just a few examples. And with this, I hide my laser pointer, and I want to give the floor to my colleague, Bogdan.
Thank you, Bogdana.
You are welcome.
I'm going to continue showing patterns, and they are fairly new. We introduced them starting Navision 2013. One of them is 2013, and the other in 2013 are 2. And the first one is about queries. First 2 ones actually are about queries. The first one is about using CL query objects to detect duplicates. Yes. So one problem that we have to solve every now and then is to identify duplicate data in a master table. For example, you have the customer table, and because of data entry errors, it's very possible that you reintroduce the same customer twice using the same name. And we don't really like that. Another problem, for example, could be finding contacts that have the same name. Why is that needed? To know if the table has duplicates or not? Because we would like to clean up the data, and we would like to merge those contacts, for example. So it's a first step, a preliminary step in cleaning up your database. Before Dynamics 2013, there were a number of solutions you could choose to solve this problem. Of course, you could define that field that you want to filter on as a primary key, but that's not really a good solution because you're not going to define the name as a primary key. It doesn't make any sense. In theory, you could do it, but it's not a good idea. And the classic solution is to loop through the table and filter on the same table in another loop. So like basically it's a self-join. You join the customer table to itself and see and count how many connecting records there are. In Dynamics NAV 2013, we introduced a new object type called query, and that can be successfully used to solve this in a more elegant way. So what do we need to implement this pattern? We would have to define a query object where the data item is the table that we want to say that it has duplicates or not. We define the field that we want to search on as a grouped field, so in our case, the name field. Then we define a totaling field that has the count method as a totaling method. And we filter on count greater than 1, of course. And then all you need to do is invoke this query in the code. If the query returns any results, it means that you have duplicates in that table. Just to give you a small example of how it used to be implemented before. So first you had to loop to the table and then set range on the same table again. So it was basically a self-join, which of course works fine for in the legacy code, but we could do it even better now that we have tools to do it. As you can see, if you define a query the way I presented a bit earlier, all you need to do is open the query and return whether it has records or not. So now we solved the problem with only 2 lines of code instead of going through all this loop. There are some examples in Dynamics NAV 2000, especially around chart management. There are, of course, some limitations. The first thing you will notice is that you have to define a separate query for each field that you want to identify duplicates on. That's, of course, a problem, but how many times do you really need to search for other fields than name and address, let's say? So it's just enough to define 2 queries. Queries cannot be created in code on the fly, so you have to statically define them beforehand. So that can have some consequences even in the license, if I understand correctly, because you have a limited number of objects that you can define. And they also do not take parameters at runtime. This is something in the product yet. But still, it's more efficient because it's also faster than doing it by looping and filtering. The second pattern I'm going to show you involves queries. So we're getting into a bit of a more complex situation now. So in a very real problem that we confronted in Dynamics NAV 2013 R2, we developed automatic bank reconciliation. Maybe some of you know about it if you went through the readiness materials. Basically, the problem is you have the bank account reconciliations and the bank account ledger entries. And you, let's say, import it because we implemented this feature in some of the countries. So you import a bank statement and you want to match the bank statement that you imported with existing bank account ledger entries. So basically, it's a join operation between the two tables. How would you do it before we had queries? You would have to loop through the first table, and then for each record in the first table, you would have to loop through the second table. But this means you have a nested loop. This is pretty costly because you have a lot of back and forth to the database. And it's also not really scalable because if you imagine having this problem with 3 connected tables, you end up with 2 nested loops. So the complexity of the code really increases. So again, in Dynamics NAV 2013, we introduced the query. So we decided to give it a try and see how it can be done. Basically, what you need to do is to get the tables that you want to join with the free on this set of tables, and then have a processing code unit that goes through the records in the query and does whatever you need it to do. In our case, find matching records. So before Dynamics NAV 2013, you would have to put some filters on the left-hand table, loop through the records, and then find the related tables in the other table. And you consider them to be a match, and of course, you can apply them to each other. The query approach is simpler. You just define the query with a static definition, as I mentioned before. You loop through the records, and while looping through the records, you decide if they represent a solution or not. I'm going to show you right in the product. Let's hope this switch works. What we implemented. Can you see it? Yes. So if you go to the product, you will find the query called 1252 bank reconciliation match candidate. And if we, if you design it, you would see that we connect the bank account reconciliation line table to the ledger entry through some key, of course. And then, using this query, we have a processing code unit, which is also called 1252. Just a second. Match bank account reconciliation lines. Oh. Which what does? It loops through the query as I explained. So as you can see, it opens the query, and it reads the records in the query. And then, of course, we have a scoring engine, but it's a more complex example. But essentially what it does, it goes through the query records, and then if they are a match candidate, they are put to a temporary table and then processed after that. But that's pretty much how it looks. So if you're looking for an example in the application code. Okay, going back to our presentation. So the advantages of this new approach: it's faster because it's using the power of SQL Server code database once, getting the whole data set. We don't have this communication with a server. It's also scalable in the sense that you can reuse it. You define the query once, and you can use it for a whole class of problems, just with small tweaks in the code. The code becomes cleaner because you don't have these nested loops that are very complex if you increase the number of tables. So that also leads to easy maintenance, better and easy maintenance. The limitation is, of course, you have to define query objects, which can have an impact on the license as well. And again, they have a static definition, so there's no way of dynamically altering the query once you define it. So you have to really define your problem beforehand very clearly. And as an example, it's exactly the example that I showed you before. It's about the bank account reconciliation matching. If you want to see how it's done the old way, you can look at the general journal line matching, because that one is done through nested loops. So that basically creates a Cartesian product of the two tables and then tries to find all potential candidates. So we have both patterns actually right now. But we would like in the future to focus more on this pattern. Okay, and the third one, which is probably the most complex one, is mapping W1 features to local data structures. As most of you probably know, we have a global version that is called W1, this version, the core version of the application, and then country versions that are built on top with local features. The problems we had was that many times when the W1 version didn't have a feature, the localization team developed their own feature in a specific country. Then time has passed, and we decided to implement in W1 a generic version of that feature. So now we would like to make it work with the country feature, right? One option would be to cut the country feature, but we won't like to do that because people would probably get upset. So we have to make these two features coexist. So the user that is used of doing his activities, his or her activities in one way in the country version should be able to use the functionality that you added in W1. But then you have a problem because they have a different table structure. They use a different algorithm to process. So that's why we decided for Dynamics NAV 2013 R2 to implement something that can be called a proxy pattern. Bogdana mentioned the object-oriented patterns before. A proxy pattern basically means you have a real subject, which is like a data set, for example, a table. And what a proxy does, it processes the records in the real subject and exposes them to a consuming client through an interface. So basically, it standardizes different table structures and also only shows out a standard table structure. How exactly was this implemented in our code? Bogdana mentioned the SEPA credit transfers feature. So this is a place where we use this pattern. Basically, SEPA is a payment standard. It's a standard XML format that banks in Europe, in Eurozone in particular, and in EU in general, use for transferring money. So both credit transfer, which means paying your vendors, direct debits, which means collecting money from your customers, and then there's the third standard called bank statement, which you can use to import bank statements from your bank in a standard format. So basically, it involves exporting vendor payments to an XML file. As Bogdana showed, there's an action on the payment journal based on the general line table, which is called export to payments file. When we started investigating this feature, we discovered that there's vendor bills in Italy that does pretty much the same. You export payments, vendor payments to a file. There's something called payment slips in France, something called cartera in Spain, and so on. So it really got very complicated, and we needed to do something to make it work. So we implemented this kind of proxy pattern. For example, the example I'm showing is from Italy. You have a local table called vendor bill header, and it also has lines, by the way. So that's the real subject. That's where the user expects the export to be initiated from, because that's where they enter their data. They don't use the general line to export. So what we did, we implemented this code unit called SEPA Credit Transfer Prepare Source, which acts as a proxy. What it does, it goes and collects records from the vendor bill header and transforms them into general lines. And from there, they are consumed by the W1 feature just the way it's done in W1. So they're just exported into an XML file. This is the flow. It's a bit long, but I just wanted to show you where we tapped into this flow. There is a handling code unit, and then there is a processing code unit, which calls an XML port, which itself collects its own data. So the connecting point is code unit 1222, prepare source. That's where we tapped in. So what will this code unit do in a country version, like, for example, in Italy? It will, in W1, it receives a set of general lines and spits out exactly the same set. So it doesn't do anything in W1. It's basically empty code. But in a country version, we overload it to take this empty set of general lines, select the local payment data, which in Italy, for example, it's called vendor bill header and lines, move the data into temporary general lines, and then it outputs a set of temporary general lines that will be processed on exactly as they are in W1. So whereas change here, I think I'll use the pointer. What changes here is that the starting point is no longer the export action in the payment journal that users in W1 would use. It's an export action in the vendor bill header, and that's where the process initiated. Then it goes through the same process, and what happens, this is where the magic happens in code unit 1222, it transforms the vendor bill header and its lines, of course, into general lines, and then everything moves on exactly the way it does in W1. And of course, there are a lot of limitations to this pattern. For example, in order to be able to extract the local payment data, we are putting a filter on the document number. But this means that the local payment data primary key should not be longer than 20 characters, because that's the document number size on table 81. So there's a technical limitation there. And another problem is that this introduces a lot of complexity. You have to test it very thoroughly, because we make a lot of assumptions. We're saying, yeah, you can take these vendor bill lines, and turn general lines. That's an assumption we make, but we discovered that there's a lot of local logic that we don't have in the W1 feature, and we had to deal with that. For example, they are grouping lines based on vendor and vendor bank account. We had to support that as well before actually putting the data into the general lines. So there are a lot of integration points that are easy to miss. So it is complex. I actually wanted to show a bit of code. Let's see if we can do it. Just to give you an idea of how this would work. So I have the Italian version. So a code unit called. So it has a function, copy general lines. And inside there is a create temporary general lines. This doesn't do anything in W1. It's empty. So it just returns the same data set that it got. But then in a country like Italy, what it does, it identifies a vendor header and then a number of lines. And then it goes through these lines and stores them as general lines. As you can see, it calls this insert temporary general line. And here is where the problem is, this insert temporary general lines. Because you have to really know and really be sure that the fields in table 81 correspond to those fields in the local table. So this is where you need the program manager to come and really stay with you and tell you, yeah, this is how it should behave. We hope that our assumptions were correct. Time will tell. So this is what we implement. And I think I'm done. I'll give on the mic to Hannes. Yes. Yes, he's going to show the mini app. Thank you.
And now it's time for the mini app. I have 1, 2, 3 slides, I think, and then a short demo. So don't worry here. This is the one. I will start by talking about the what, the why, and the how. Do a short demo, and then later on, Nikolai will tell something about the patterns we have implemented in the mini app. In Denmark, we have a product called C5 that is aiming for the SMB market segment there. So almost a year ago, we were asked to create a light version of NAV that is hostable and where the users can use this try and buy thing. So we also had some goals. The product should be intuitive and usable out of the box. We have focused on sales and purchasing, pure thing. It shouldn't impair with the existing NAV functionality, and this little thing, simple upgrade, which is very important. How did we do it? Actually, at first, we tried to play a bit with the configuration, but then we realized that we need to add in some new pages. We add the number series of 1300. We add a lot of new pages, a few code units and tables to do this small behavior change. And then when it's posed to the user, the standard pages, they are hidden. If they have them in the license, those they don't have access to in the license are removed from the users. The same with the actions pointing to those pages they don't have access to. And so with the controls. Oh, now it's demo time. Before I start, I have one ask to you. Could you for 10 minutes assume that you don't know anything about NAV? I know it's a bit of a stupid ask, but because this product is addressing small customers who are not that familiar with ERP, and they are just basically eager to run their own business and send out an invoice once in a while. Let me see. Open. I perhaps should maximize it. I will get this okay because I'm running on the traditional license. And this is not because we are in a cinema. We start by a movie. Every new users the first time around get this welcome to NAV movie. I notice none of you have popcorn, so I will close the movie again. Up here. And then I will go into the role center. It's a rather light role center. If the user wants to replay the welcome video again, it is up here. And then there is another video where you get some tips and tricks on how to set up your system. The last button we have here points to a help server with more traditional help on the how to do the concrete scenarios that you need to do. When you get familiar with the system here and you don't want to see those activities again, you can of course hide them. Please remember to refresh your browser, and they are gone. So now you are still unfamiliar with NAV, you are running a business, you have got this product, and you want to create a sales invoice. So I'll go here to new sales invoice. Please notice that the traditional fields like numbers and customer numbers are gone. It's very few fields, even fewer actions than on the traditional one. And we actually want to support the users while they create the invoice to be able to create the customer at the same time. We call that create on the fly. And now it was Bogdan who was here before, so he will probably buy some pieces. He's not registered, but that's okay. Out of the box, we also provide, of course, we provide a chart of account, VA setup, and so on and so forth, but we also provide some setup template. Nicolai will talk more about that later. I will pick a private customer in Denmark, and all I need as a user now, that is to go in and set a street. I pick private customer Denmark because there I know some of the postcode. If I scroll a bit down, you will notice that the traditional posting group and so on are set up by the template. New users are really struggling up that, and the same with payment terms. And then my customer, almost probably spelled, sorry for that, is ready to use. And then I just missed to put in some product lines here to this invoice, so I'm done with. As a part of our development process, we actually have usability studies. And some of the users in that market segment were struggling a lot with creating the item lines. They start by going here to, the description and try to key in whatever item, and right away they want to just continue with giving some quantities, and then they thought they were done. And then they got this usually warning, there's nothing to post, or you need to something, this and that. So therefore we added some on the description and instructional message telling you how to actually put in an item on there. And again, if the users are familiar with the system and don't want this bloody notification again, we can show do not show again. I'll just leave it on for now. Besides that, we made the fields quantity, unit of measure, and all the prices non-editable until a product had been chosen. For the product, we decide to follow the traditional way. Pick an existing one or create a new. Again here, template supporting. Come on. That is. And then the user just needs to put in the description and, not to forget, a price for the product. If I scroll a bit down here, again you will see all the product, the posting group was set up through the templates. Now you will get 10 pieces here, and then I should more or less ready to go. In the bottom, you know, as a hard copy of invoice, you will expect to see the total. We also have that here, plus, don't do that. Come back. We have also put in to describe exactly what currency this business is about. On the left side, you also have the opportunity to either see the predefined invoice discount % that you are giving this customer, or have the opportunity to give some stupid keyboard. There we are. So up again here. Let me try to post it. Oh, did you actually? Oh, I'll just say no here. If I hover here on the actions, we have implemented tooltips here that kind of also support the users when he goes to see what is going on if he's a bit uncertain. So as in the traditional product, you are asked, do you want to post? You said yes. In the traditional product, when you post an invoice, and down there in posted document, I'm a user and so are you for the 10 minutes here. So you want to see the posted document. And I know you are clever in the audience. I told you that I'll sell 10 pieces to Bogdan. I keyed in 11. I wonder what I do now. Traditionally, I had to create a new credit memo, post that, and start with a new invoice. or just create a credit memo for the one piece if I already have sent a hard copy of the invoice. So, but I'll just try this little button here. That will cancel the existing invoice by creating a credit memo and post that. Then it will give me a new instance of the invoice that I can post. If I can hit the button, yes. And yes again. And this time around, I don't want to see the posted invoice. I'm a bit uncertain now. Everything went well. There we have. And again, Bogdan, sorry for misspelling the name. I just want to go here to the ledger entries where, where you can see the credit memo that we created behind the scene. As you notice that there is, come on, not there, close this one. I have a lot of existing customers here. That is actually because we merged the template and all the setup data plus the demo data because we want to just show the charts that we're also having here on the Role Center. And showing charts without having data on the charts is kind of, doesn't make sense. In the bottom we have the traditional trial balance charts, and up here we actually have a set of charts. I'm now showing the cash cycle, but if I want to see the cash flow instead, I just pick this and that will stay here. Oh, the setup, fine again. And now I will give the word to Nicola. And now you are still experienced NAV developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders. For now? Okay, excellent. So today I'm going to present to you a set of 4 templates that we have selected. And we have selected them because to show you something that you can easily implement in your own solutions. So that was the criteria. So for 2 of the templates that I'm going to present to you, they are a little bit bigger, and 2 templates are smaller. And for the beginning, we will begin with using the configuration templates to simplify and speed up data creation. So the problem that we are trying to solve here is that the setting of the data and customers, vendors, and items in the system was perceived to be very difficult by the people that are not familiar with the NAV and do not have any training with the ERP software. And even though some of them were able to fill out the customers and the items, they expressed concerns because they were not sure if all of the posting groups and the payment terms were set up correctly. So they even said that if it was the actual production data, they would be really concerned. So we have mitigated this problem by applying templates automatically. And the feedback from the user was that they felt much better because somebody who knows the system has provided the system out of the box. Your existing users that are familiar with NAV and that know how to use the system can benefit from it as well, because in case they are constantly setting the same sets of data for creating domestic customers or EU customers, they can just speed it up with a couple of clicks. So if you have a case that a user is constantly setting up 8 or 10 or more fields in the same data sets, you can reuse this template. Also, it is a bit error-prone if the user is constantly entering the sets of data, because from time to time they can make mistakes. So to show you how to implement the solution, this is the diagram and the flow. So we begin by inserting a record, and then we apply a template to a record, and then we insert all the related templates. In our example, we would insert a customer, and then related templates would be dimensions, because many users struggled with providing the dimensions. To insert a related template, we are just following the same flow. The related template, the related record template, we insert a record, apply a template, and then we can insert related template, if we would like. Solution is based on the rapid start. We did this because we didn't want to introduce a new concept into NAV and yet another way to store the templates. So we are using the configuration template header from the rapid start and also the configuration template lines. Configuration template header is the table where we are storing the template definition. And the lines can either store the field values or they can store the references to the other templates that we have in the. To show you how to implement it, we have provided this snippet. So follow the flow, we insert a record via template. We recommend reusing this function from the config template management, and it can be used for any table that we have in the system. And basically, we just need to save a value here. You can see just the customer, and to apply a template on it, we need to provide 4 lines of code in the solution. To insert it, we'll provide a couple of more lines of code. So here we first need to find related templates. Then we iterate all of the lines. We check if this is a dimension template. And then we load the code to insert the dimension. How we are inserting the dimensions is the same inserting a customers. We insert a record. We can provide a reference to the customer because dimension is belonging to the customer. We apply a template to a dimension record, which is exactly the same code as before. And since we do not have any related, this case is basically done. So as you can see, to implement applying the templates to the customers and as well, it takes very little code to actually implement it in the standard application. So we're done with implementation. Next step is to surface the actions in the UI, and we recommend to use this approach. Implement the new from template action, apply template action. Now, this is not something that we did in the mini application because user experience team insisted that we have only one concept. So in the mini application, we have removed the new configuration, and we have created the application action named new, and we have assigned to it new icon, so it looks exactly the same action. The problem with this one is that it is not scale in the standard application. We managed to get to it because we have one role center. So for the items record and customers, we needed only to provide change in 9. But when you multiply this by 20 role centers that we have in the system, you apply this configuration changes on 180 pages approximately, which is basically not scalable, not maintainable. That's why we're recommending that if you're implementing it in the standard app, to use this pattern here. Once it's in the system, users will have to maintain them, and you will probably have the need to enter the new templates in the system. So here you have 2 ways of doing this. The first way is using this configuration template, and this page is good because it is highly generic, and you do not have to provide any additional code for it. It can table. The negative side, it is basically hard to use, since the field here is a free text field. It has of 250, and you do not get any lookups or assistance while you're filling it out. So you, as a partner, some super users will to use this page, but most likely all of the other users will not. In the mini application, we have this approach. So for each template that we have in the system, providing a card that is resembling an actual document, an actual record that we are creating. So in this case, the customer template mimicked the same layout and the same fields as we have customer card. And this is much more user-friendly because now lookups and the simple validation rules. The problem is that we have to add and maintain more code, which is definitely a drawback. To show you how to implement this, I can also show you how these charts are looking, how these template pages are looking. So this is a standard config template. And as you see, to enter a new field, I would have to scroll all the way down. Data is answered, and I here edit. And now I can use the drill down to get a list of available fields. It will take some time. And then I can type the default value, and then I have to test if the template is set correctly. For the mini app, if I open it from this one, I can go to menu, to new, edit, and here you can see it is resembling, and I have all of the lookup I would have on a normal card. It's much more user-friendly. I have a link to mentions, So I can use this page to quickly set up the related templates that are coming with the customer automatically. So how to implement this page is shown on the next slide. Sorry, just a second. Implementation is provided. So from the master table, we need to copy all of the fields to another table. Why we need to do this? The reason is to use a master record, for example, a custom, as a temporary record. All of the validation that we do on it, if it involves the other tables, they are going to be permanent in the system. So inserting on a temporary customer is going to make a permanent contact in the application. So this is a side that we wouldn't like to have. So in this case, we need all of the fields that we would like to use it, remove all the codes to the other tables and all of the logic, keep only the simple rules, and create a new table that should be used as a temporary table. On this temporary template table, we need to overwrite on modify and open to write to the configuration template header and configuration lines table. Reuse the rapid start tables. And as a last, add a new page where users can see and edit the template. For the code, is to create a field, an array containing the field references that we are going to save as template, and then you can functions that are provided for you from the configuration template management. And the first one is to configuration template in lines, and for updating, you can use update. And as the last delete, you can just delete related templates, and true trigger is going to delete all of the lines that are belonging to the header. This is just the example listing the fields into an array, because as you can see, we are providing 23 fields with the customer templates, speeding process. But also in case we remove a field or reorder them, we didn't want to change the numbers. So the snippet for the code how to do that. For the test, basically, since we can update the master table, we need to remind them to update the table as well. And we need to implement the test. Test code is rather simple. We need to get the record ref from the customer. We get all of the fields that we are saving it, and then iterating through all of the fields that we are saving as a template and comparing are the property string. So in case master table and forgets to update the template table, they're reminded by the test. The ideas for improvement is to implement the solution more in the standard products and provide the actions. And the second idea is to have process. So in case you need it, you can have templates that are related to this. So a certain user is using only domestic customers. They can only see templates to filter them per user. As the next pattern that we are going to present is easy update of set supplementary information. And trying to solve here is the fact when user is entering an input, most often in the standard application, getting a very confusing message is coming from the test field on some of the related tables. So, and this message is highly confusing, first of all, because the name doesn't need to match the name of the page that we are using. And user has to stop the task that they are doing, find the page in the product, provide information, and so there is a chance they will be lacking some other information in the product. So in the mini application, implemented the following. So if we go to the open sales invoices, I can open sales invoice here, and I'm trying to sell government institution in Denmark, and for this I will need to use YoYo invoicing. But my setup is provided. So when I post the invoice and I say yes, I'm going to get prompted if I would like to provide setup information, because it is not possible to post. Say yes, we are going to show a simplified with all necessary information BL work. So here we are telling the user that he needs to fill in the bank branch number and bank account number, or the SWIFT code and IBAN address. So it is highly guided through the UI. In case I do not provide it, I get a validation error. So this is much better test field, because if I would provide one field that the error has told me, then I would have to go back and update. And many users in the usability studies find it very distracting and confusing. So to go back to slides, from perspective, you add a verify function on the setup table or on the relate table that you need to check if all of the sets available in the function. Prompt the user if they would like to enter the data, and then check if all of the data is provided. If not, then you just show an error. The ideas are that we can implement the test field to full page instead of showing an error message, so users see it automatically the platform. And as anti-pattern, we are saying this is not if test field is very bad to use, the record is not the record that the customer is currently updating, because then they have to figure out where to change it. Much better to use error messages that are more informative. So for template, we will show you how you can use the custom charts with business chart add-in to implement the same charts, looking exactly the same in the web client and in the Windows. So currently this is the only chart type that is able to run on both display targets. The second problem that this pattern is solving is how do you program a custom chart, because generic chart is not programmable. You would also reuse the same chart on multiple pages. To show you an implementation overview, these are all of the components, just the chart up and it takes a card part that is hosting a business chart add-in. This is a .NET that is providing events. Add-in ready, on click, and on double click. Part is the one that is actually providing of this. So what happens if the user clicks? As a source table of the card part, to use the add-in buffer table, responsible for handling all of the data. So the add-in buffer table should store the data from the business chart add-in, handle the .NET CL conversion, also handle all of the capture, the translation, and provide the logic down and other data helper function. So it's responsibility. In the standard product, we have a business chart buffer that is a generic page that you can just simply reuse without having to write your own. This is a very simple. We do not have a solution in the product, so we usually have the charts that are able to support some kind of a user interaction. So to show you a chart like this in the standard option, we have this trailing. So just load, and here the user is able from the actions to select period on which they would like to see it, and maybe change the view to a stacked area. So the chart is going to look completely different. And I, as a user, would expect that you persist all of the changes that I've done. So the next time when I navigate to the chart, it should show the same. So, in order to implement this, we need to add 3 new components. The first component table, the setup table, is responsible for storing the personalization. Then the unit, which is responsible for implements and actually reading and writing from this table. And it needs to apply a setup table to the add. So it initializes the chart. And it is added to the card part as a global variable. We also have a third component called the setup page that you can open from the card part. And this is an optional component if you want to provide more options how they can customize the chart. The third implementation that we did is the mini app. And to show you this one in the product better first. So if I go back to the mini app, the demo, implemented a single chart where the user can the role center and find all of the chart would like. It's very nice because you have a single place where you can find your chart information. And here, if we say select chart, we get a list of charts that I can choose from. I can also browse through them with the previous next chart. It's also solutions, and we have also implemented the short description of the chart. What is the data that is being shown and how it is being calculated. So, on the implementation part, the only parts that I need to add are these 3 new bits. I add the chart setup table that is storing which charts it can show and which management code units are responsible for which. Then this code unit that we have added, it's a master management code unit, and it is providing an interface to the card part, to all of the actions and events. So when an event happens, it is able by the setup to know which and the responsibility of the management code units and the setup tables stay the same. And you also have a setup page, so you can access the individual setup pages of all of the charts. So in the mini application, implement pattern for approximately 20 for approximately 7 charts, which is around 20 different objects. It's showing you how you can basically turn a very complex system into a simple one. If you like to add a new chart, I need to provide these 3 components and to tie them up into these components. So basically to all of the developers, it's clear how they can implement it themselves. And for the last button that we are going to show to you today, you can add ability by help and instructions in the UI. And this is a combination of a small UI patterns. Some of the problems we faced while implementing MiniApp was that we couldn't simplify and unblock the users on some of the NAV functionality. For example, I started typing straight in the descriptions. Providing a proper implementation proved to be very costly, so as the last we used to instance in the UI. These are problems, and they are that basically whenever you are providing instructions from the UI, you're impairing users' productivity and be highly disruptive, and you're also mixing the instructions with the data. The user learns how to use the system. All of these UI instructions that you have implemented in your solution, this into the way. So all of the instructions, they must be dismissible. And we also highly recommend that you use them sporadically only for the biggest problem you have in your application. Because if you overdo it, the solution is going to look ugly. Implementation is very simple. We implemented each instruction within a code unit, and each instruction is providing interfaces. It is checking if it's disabled, to disable, and the code to show the instructions. And we are saving all of it in a table, knowing which instruction is the user. And these are the following patterns that in the MiniApp. So the first one is getting started. Dismissible, as we have seen in the demo. That was the for the description. Implemented the 5 steps with instructional text. To show you this one in the product. So getting started, and the implementation of the getting started part is following. If we go to the and we open the activities, we have grouped all of the actions in a queue group. The reasoning for this was because on the web client, you are not able to mix stack queues with the actions because they are going to be removed by the platform. And on the control actions, we have defined 3 actions. So this help topic action that is opening a grouped help for you is being made by just implementing an empty action that has no code on the trigger, and you need to provide this very icon, tile. And then the platform is going to create a help call for you automatically. So all that you need to do is to provide a help topic. And this is very nice in case you have your own ISV solution or your own very specific solution. So you can place all of the help that is specific for your solution into a single place. For the welcome videos, the implementation is following. We have provided a JavaScript add-in that's being invoked as this. So you only need to provide captions, height and width, and a source to the video. And then we are going to play it as an embedded video control. To show you an example, so for the MiniApp or C5, we are going to host all of the videos on Microsoft Showcase, but I believe also on the YouTube and other channels. So in order to get this code, we just have to wait here. When you're playing a video, you have an action that you can share a video, and it's automatically going to provide the source to you. And a very nice part of this is basically that you're getting a video player control and the hosting done by somebody else. So if I play this video that is getting started, when I click share here getting the source code, if I scroll it, that I can just paste in the environment and the video is going to play for you automatically. This current add-in has a following drawback, and it is not possible to show it in the Windows client because the Flash player control that is used by YouTube, Microsoft Showcase, does not work well with the web browser control that the Windows client is using. But as a mitigation, you can just provide a link for your Windows users that will open a browser, or you can invoke a web client. As the last option, you can even implement custom add-in that is able to play videos from the raw tailored client if it is an important scenario. For the same way how you can also integrate help in the product, use this part. So in this release, we have also enabled you navigate page on the web client. And here the problem that we had was that if I change something here, we would just blank a repeater without any instructions why and how to proceed. So what we did is to provide a notification with this short instruction what happened and how you can get the information back into the repeater. And in this case, we have used the fast tab with instructional text, which is really good because then I do not have any clipping because of the long texts. And you can also control the visibility of the fast tab by a Boolean variable dynamically. So if I click find here, the message should disappear. And lastly, we have implemented the tooltips for all of the fields and all of the actions in the mini app. And this is done as a generic solution. And also if the users are clicking on the help in the web client, the help topic for a field, which is a small usability that we did. The idea for improvement for this one would be to implement the tooltips automatically in the standard application by running a tool. How we did it was to get the small headers from the help topics that are describing the fields, and we just automatically field properly. Another idea for the improvement is to provide support so you can invoke the help topics from the CL code. You have to put it necessarily on the role center, but you can also reuse it in the other pages. So that was all, and I will hand up to Bogdana for some closing words.
The most important thing, or one of the most, if you think this is useful, give us feedback and get involved, because it helps us decide where to invest our time for the future. So here is the NAV patterns wiki, but you can find it on the dynamics.com. And with this, I want to say to all of you, thanks for today. And it's now t-shirt. I'm in question time.
Questions before t-shirts?
Yes, please.
Should we make a rule for it? It's random.
Is this a question?
Yeah, it's a question for you. Let's see, first 5 questions. Okay?
One question.
One t-shirt.
Hello.
Hello.
The first pattern you
Okay.
the first pattern you described showing multiple error messages for the user input worked really well when all the input's independent. You can isolate each row and analyze it independently. But what if the user input's more of a process? The first bit has to work before the second bit can work. So if you hit an error on the first stage, the rest of the inputs can't be even, you can't analyze it.
Yeah, very good point, because this pattern works where all your processing is done in one. So you can either not use the pattern or just actually split the processing in two. And then check the first for all the lines and check the second part processing for all the lines again. It would still be simpler than to click around, but this is a really good point. I don't know how to... Yes. Thanks.
There are t-shirts, so please ask questions.
Yeah. But there was one hand
Where?
over there. It's all what I saw before working for the application. I worked with object-oriented language, and there is one approach to everything. It's this is related to the first question. We don't have to overdo it, because the patterns are really okay or really cool. Use them in the context, but we should use them to solve them, not just for the sake of using them. So whenever the pattern doesn't fit, either modify it if it's possible or just don't use it. It's all about simplifying our work, not using the patterns only to use.
Yes.
Just an observation. On the document numbers, you decide to hide the numbers, but for the master data, you may want to show the item numbers, for example. Was there a reason for that?
In the mini app?
In the mini app,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, it all happened for a reason. In general, during the process where you create a document, then you are most likely, for the the small customers, you are into them either by phone or directly, you have the name by heart. But of course, we have numbers behind the scene. We also have entries. We need to have those entries by the end of the day. But the process of creating an invoice, we got the feedback that names work better than numbers.
All the items, when you're entering the line, you can type. So you can specifically name your item, so you can easily, you don't have to use a. Yeah. So usually, I believe that number series on the item, they support the free text by default. Yes.
And I see one more hand over there.
Well, you get some exercise.
Yes. Yeah. It's good before lunch.
Any more questions over there, please, people?
I think the mic is not on yet.
Only one T-shirt, though.
Yes.
Yes, questions in one. Is the mini app available now? Is there a different licensing, and is there an upgrade? As in, is it you're installing the same index but just making that part available?
Good question.
It's more or less one question, but I understand all the things around. Now the C5 mini app is available in Denmark. You can see the objects, or the majority of the objects in WS. That's to implement and develop. And for the upgrade, is it just to change the license, then you get bigger nav.
It is a different license. Yes. It has a completely different licensing model. Yes. And I believe we have 8 or 9 partners that have with it in Denmark. So from the Microsoft site, you can go and see the solutions that these partners are hosting. So that's where you can find them about the prices and everything.
And we found the next question here in the middle.
Can you see it?
One more question in the buffer.
Hi. I'm wondering a little bit about the community and how it's going to be moderated, that publishes all the design pedestals, you can sort them or see them in a way, or if it's just going to be a forum where everyone just posts their type of patterns or somehow. So, yeah, the big question is, will there be a moderator that creates real design patterns with pictures and so on?
So we have been thinking how to do this to best fit, I don't know, the need to be agile and to just be open to contributions, because this is what we really, really need now. But for the moment, if you want to add a pattern or edit it, you need publisher rights, which you can get from us. And then once you've had, it's not moderated. If we are going to move to a different way of doing this, yes, it's possible if we get enough authors, and then it might become harder to follow up with what's going on. But for the moment, once you've contacted us and you showed us that there is one pattern, or you have some really nice points to make on the existing patterns, then you get the publisher rights, and that's it. Of course, we have a history of the pattern on the wiki, so we can always restore what's been there in the past if it. But this project, we are just trying to figure out as we go how to best map it. We don't want to force it into some strong restrictions that would drive everyone away. Yes. So that's why any feedback really is taken into account.
No moderator for now. Just key in your information.
One more question that has to do more with the strategy or a roadmap product. It's a nice thing to have patterns, but I think you get the most out of a pattern if you have an object-oriented system behind them.
Well, yeah.
So unless you have an object-oriented system, you cannot reuse code, you do not have inheritance, so the pattern has a limited scope. So the question is, how do you plan to move with regard to object-oriented design?
Could you run out and find Michael?
Yeah, I have.
We all have application developers, I think, a strong wish for moving there. We don't have any concrete plan now, to be honest.
And regarding the design patterns, you can have them even if it is not object-oriented. For example, C as a language has some design patterns. But I agree with you, you're highly limited compared to the oriented world with the amount of stuff that you can do.
Yeah, and we feel that when we have to implement. But the link between this project and going to object-oriented, I think would not be more than exposing the need if it comes from you, like this question that you put now.
Yes, and for the NAV, we got some feedback from the training people that are training the other developers, and they're highly interested in something that is called implementation patterns. So we explain to you how do you do this in NAV. So it's not a design pattern as such, a generic one, but it is very specific, explaining you which components are available and which components you can, so it can speed you up.
We have a question over there. We have over here.
Over there.
Sorry.
Yes, hi. I have the queries introduced in the second or third part. The question is, are there an equivalent to the queries on SQL Server, which can be created directly in the Management Studio? And the second, which relates to that, is can the queries now in NAV be used in future, for example, instead of current querying like set range and find set?
I think if I remember correctly, they do generate query objects in SQL Server behind the scenes. So it's created at the runtime. Actually, not at definition time. And in the future, I mean, you can filter on queries as it is now. So you can get a data set from the query, and then within your code, filters you want. That is supported. What you don't support running with parameters. That's a big limitation that we have now. So you get the entire data set. So you have to know what you want to obtain. Hopefully, maybe we'll have some more features in the future on this subject.
Last question. Oh.
Yes, hello. The forms for new, let's say, customer where you have the minimized fields is nice in a sense, but you have to make it for every place where you need it. And if you want to add a new field to the table, you will also have to add it 2 places, both the original page and the new page. Did you actually consider as a property instead, like you have the property for having promoted fields, instead having a new property where you can say this is a, just an example, required field or recommended field instead of doing this?
Yes, we did. Yes. But on the time span that we had for implementing it, it didn't meet the current.
So you are referring to the asterisk mark of mandatory fields and stuff like this?
Yes.
Yes, we are considering that.
We are considering that. In the previous release, because some of the other client functionality that had a higher priority. So you will be able to see what was implemented in the client in the next session after us.
There's one more question there.
A last one?
Yeah, let's take one.
Oh, okay.
There's one more.
Yes. Sorry for that, but up there.
Over there.
Yes. And have questions later on, you know where to find us more or less. We're hanging around wearing this white shirt, so don't be shy.
We'll be here.
Apparently you spend a lot of time to design some kind of template.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be nice to simply have the option save as template and then show all the fields and indicate which fields you want to keep and not keep?
Actually, we have it, but we hadn't had the time to present it today because on our trials we were running short, so we didn't present it. But if you open the mini solution and on the card on the templates, you have the save as template option. And it is going to take all of the fields from the existing record and to store it as a template. And it also takes the dimensions that you have defined on the item on the customer and saves them as a template as well. And I just forgot to tell you all of this. If you install a W1 build and you select the role center to be a small business and select the company to be Kronos, not Kronos International, then you can try out the mini app yourself if you like. Yeah. But you need to have a developer license for this ability.
The majority have, I trust. Well,
Well,
thank you for
okay.
now. Yes.
So,
Thanks for now.
thank you. And lunchtime.
Yes.
And lunchtime, yes.
Oh.
Yes, hi. I have the queries introduced in the second or third part. The question is, are there an equivalent to the queries on SQL Server, which can be created directly in the Management Studio? And the second, which relates to that, is can the queries now in NAV be used in future, for example, instead of current querying like set range and find set?
I think if I remember correctly, they do generate query objects in SQL Server behind the scenes. So it's created at runtime. Actually, not at definition time. And in the future, I mean, you can filter on queries as it is now. So you can get a data set from the query, and then within your code, filters you want. That is supported. What you don't support running with parameters. That's a big limitation that we have now. So you get the entire data set. So you have to know what you want to obtain. Hopefully, maybe we'll have some more features in the future on this subject.
A last question. Oh.
Yes, hello. The forms for new, let's say, customer where you have the minimized fields is nice in a sense, but you have to make it for every place where you need it. And if you want to add a new field to the table, you will also have to add it 2 places, both the original page and the new page. Did you actually consider as a property instead, like you have the property for having promoted fields, instead having a new property where you can say this is a, just an example, required field or recommended field instead of doing this?
Yes, we did. Yes. But on the time span that we had for implementing it, it didn't meet the current.
So you are referring to the asterisk mark of mandatory fields and stuff like this?
Yes.
Yes, we are considering that.
We are considering that. In the previous release, because some of the other client functionality that had a higher priority. So you will be able to see what was implemented in the client in the next session after us.
There's one more question there.
A last one?
Yeah, let's take one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's one more.
Yes. Sorry for that, but up there.
Over there.
Yes. And have questions later on, you know where to find us more or less. We're hanging around wearing this white shirt, so don't be shy.
We'll be here.
Apparently you spend a lot of time to design some kind of template.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be nice to simply have the option save as template and then show all the fields and indicate which fields you want to keep and not keep?
Actually, we have it, but we hadn't had the time to present it today because on our trials we were running short, so we didn't present it. But if you open the mini solution and on the card on the templates, you have the save as template option. And it is going to take all of the fields from the existing record and to store it as a template. And it also takes the dimensions that you have defined on the item and the customer and saves them as a template as well. And I just forgot to tell you all of this. If you install a W1 build and you select the role center to be a small business and select the company to be Kronos, not Kronos International, then you can try out the mini app yourself.